I got all 4 of these Hummer portal boxes for $1,000 on Facebook Marketplace. And after reading tons of comments, it is very obvious that many of you want to see an affordable off-road portal axle build. So here we go. This is my 3rd portal project on the channel, and honestly, I think this will be the most relatable. This is definitely going to be by far the cheapest one, and I have a feeling that a lot of people are going to like what they see in here. Plus, I'm going to couple this project with the Jeep that I would argue is the reason that my channel exists in the first place. I would like to introduce you to a project that we're finally going to get back to, and we're going to rename it. This is Thico-lous cage. Yes, I'm serious. So as you have probably noticed, the vehicles that I build keep getting wider and more stable. This was a good width before. It'll probably be a similar width to what it was before, but I just thought the name Thico-lous cage was funny, just like Girth Brooks and Dirt Reynolds. So what you're gonna see over the next 6 months on this channel is me working on Dirt Reynolds, my J10 pickup truck, and working on Thico-lous cage. Thico-lous cage is gonna be a budget-friendly build, and it's not because I think that that's the new hot thing to do right now. It's because I have a budget just like you do. I've spent so much money in the last year building out my dream property for my family, and now my budget for toys is much, much smaller. This is a toy that I miss with every fiber of my being. I fit in a TJ like a glove. I think that it is pound for pound one of the best vehicles you can own. I love the Jeep TJ platform. You see out of it great. It fits, like, for a guy my size, I'm 6'1" and like 225. I fit perfect in there. Everything just fits right. We're finally gonna do this thing. The rear axle that's in here right now, this is a Ford 9-inch housing that I hand built in my garage 10 years ago. I bought a kit on Amazon, or sorry, on eBay. There was like 180 bucks, and it came with just a bunch of random like plate steel and some axle tubes, and I turned it into a rear axle. The basic plan is to retire this Ford 9-inch housing that I built a decade ago, but we are gonna cannibalize some of the parts inside of it because, of course, budget. I legitimately want to try to trim as much budget off the edges of our budgets that I possibly can and put that money towards like quality lockers and some different things like that. But we do have an issue here, and if you look at these axle shafts in my Samurai, these are Unimog 404 axles, and you can see how the shaft is spinning the opposite direction of the tire. This is indicative of a 2-gear portal box. So in the case of the Samurai, I've got full Unimog axles installed, which means that the factory Unimog center section is already reversing this rotation. And this is something we're gonna have to figure out for the TJ build. Just like the Unimog portals, these are 2-gear portals. So the gears spin in opposing directions. We have an input gear up here and an output gear down there. And where the gears mesh makes them flip the opposite direction. There's no spur gears in this setup. So that is a problem that we have to solve in order to marry this to a modern axle. This Ford 9-inch is in its normal position as it would be going down the road. I'm giving it a clockwise input, and as you can see, the wheels would be driving the vehicle forward. But when we flip it upside down, it does the opposite. I'm still giving it the clockwise input, and now it would be driving the vehicle backward. But in our case, when you bolt a 2-gear portal to that, now it's going to be going forward. So this is not something that I came up with. I'm going to be very clear. If you look at like Pirate 4x4, you will find really old school posts, people talking about this in the early 2000s, about seeing this done in the 90s. This is something that has been around for a long time, and this is the method that I am definitely going to take advantage of because it's by far the easiest and the cheapest. Obviously, there's an oiling challenge that we have to figure out, but that's not that big of a challenge in my opinion. We're just going to move the fill hole, and we're going to move the vent and make it to where this thing is going to do everything that we need it to. My Tacoma has got 4-gear portals. So when this front axle spins forward, so does the front tire. And that's because the input and output gear are not connected. They're connected with idler gears that go in between, which then reverses the rotation back to what we're looking for when connecting something to a modern axle. I'm sure you can imagine that you can flip over any axle to accomplish this like reverse Uno card thing that we're trying to do, but I'm choosing the Ford 9-inch specifically because I have been a fan of this platform for like 15 or 20 years. It is so strong for its size. And the hidden bonus, a lot of people don't realize this, Ford 9-inch parts to build diffs are the cheapest of like any differential to build by far. So when we're trying to do like a really budget-friendly axle project with budget-friendly portals, the first thing that comes to mind, of course, is Ford 9-inch, and then what's more budget-friendly than reusing some of the Ford 9-inch parts that I already currently own. And another cool thing about the Ford 9-inch is that it's very easy to find these pre-made diff centers. I got these on eBay for $299, which is more than I spent on the entire rear axle build whenever I built this Ford 9-inch before. But these are going to save me a boatload of time over the way that I did this job 10 years ago. I'm staring at all this, and I am visualizing fixtures. How can I set this up to where we can bolt fixtures to the table to help with fabrication? Because here's my intention. There's a company, Jesse Haynes Fabrication, that makes inner Cs, and that would definitely be the fastest way to go. I'm trying to save as much money as possible. I just don't have money in the budget in order to buy someone else's inner Cs and someone else's brakes and all that. So what I'd like to do is take advantage of the fact that we do have a fixture table. And I'm thinking we build some fixtures to hold these portals in place to the exact width that I want to build the axles. Then we can place our center section. I've already marked a center. We're going to use the center line of the table as the center line for the whole project. Then we can measure off the center line of our TJ to where we need that diff to land, so that we can go center line here. Where do we want our diff? We have our portals located at the width that we want. Then we can start to measure and cut our tubes. And then the complicated part of fabbing up our own inner Cs comes in. So that's what I'm doing right now. I'm staring at it and I'm visualizing how I want everything to land. The TJ was 65 inches wheel mount surface to wheel mount surface before, and I really like the width, like outside tire to outside tire. I bet it was like 81 to 82 inches outside to outside. So 10 inches, or no, almost 12 inches narrower than my Tacoma. But in any case, it's still gonna be wide for a TJ. What I'm thinking now, because I want to be able to share wheels and tires between my TJ and my Tacoma, because they're both going to be 8 on 6.5. Like, there's a number of reasons that I should be able to swap parts or wheels and tires between the two. I'm thinking of widening out our axle that we're going to build to 70 inches. I need to measure the wheels and tires and see where that would put us, outside tire to outside tire. So what I'm thinking is, if I split 70 in half, we're at 35. So we go make a mark at 70, make a mark at 0, and then I have a spot to aim for while we build some sort of fixtures to hold these portals exactly where we want them. And I think we should work our way from the outside in. But while I figure this out, I'm going to cut in a very, very important detail that if you're not familiar with how to calculate your own gear ratios and how important it is to plan that into your off-road truck, this next bit of information is going to change your world in the way that you look at how to build trucks. The details of this next part are so important if you are new to them, and that is actually calculating everything out before you order it. Not getting on forums and asking people to give you their best advice, but physically calculating it out yourself is so important. So first off, I loved the way the TJ performed before. I would love it to be a touch lower if possible, but as far as the gearing, but it was very, very good. And because it had a 4-speed transfer case and a 5-speed transmission, it was basically like having 2 transmissions. It worked phenomenally. But I want to use some of the numbers from the way it was built before to then compare to how it's going to be now. So first off, tire diameter. We were on a 40. Diff ratio, well, we're on a 40 and then a 39, and but either way, around a 40. Diff ratio, 5.38 to 1. Transmission ratio, our first gear was 4 to 1. Transfer case ratio was 5.44 to 1 from the 4-speed case. So we had a crawl ratio before of 117 to 1. So that's our starting point. I also want to calculate, because I do want to drive this on the road, probably not super often, but if I go to Moab or something, all the trails, you got to go down the road to get to all the trails. So 40-inch tall tire, a 538 gear ratio. All right, our 5th gear ratio was 0.79 to 1. 0.79. Transfer case, we're going to do 1 to 1 because we're trying to calculate highway, and then we're going to do 3,000 because I think for the Volkswagen TDI and in the way we're going to build it, we're going to want it to be around 3,000 RPM. So that puts us 84 miles an hour in 5th gear at 3,000 RPM. Now it's going to get a touch more complicated because we have the extra gearing of the portals, but basically what we're trying to do is we're going to calculate our diff ratio with the portal ratio, and then once we get that collective ratio between those two, we are going to put that in our calculator as just the diff ratio. So the portal box, these Hummer portals are a 0.192 to 1 reduction, and I'm looking at 2 different gear sets for the Ford 9-inch. One I found on eBay for 163 bucks, and it is a 3 to 1 gear ratio. So we're going to go 1.92 times 300 equals 5.76 to 1 would be our new diff ratio that we put into the calculator. We're going to call this option 1 because we're going to calculate this 2 different ways in order to order the right diff ratios based on our calculations. And this is where it's going to get fun. We got a 5.76 to 1. We'll do the we're going to go back to our crawl ratio. So we're at 4 to 1. Transfer case 5.44 to 1. Mile per hour, get rid of that, calculate. So if we had the exact same transmission, our new crawl ratio would be 125.34 to 1. So like I said, I wanted it slightly lower. This would be barely noticeable, so I want it a little bit lower than that. But anyway, the transmission that we're using is from a company called Silver Sport Transmission, and the new first gear ratio, or the new first gear transmission ratio is 6.16 to 1. Okay, let's calculate that. 193 to 1. Boy, I'd almost say I've seen everything I need to see here when deciding on our diff ratio, but let's write that down. That would be the new crawl. So the highway gear on the Silver Sport Tremec 4050 is a 0.76. I think that's the same if I remember correctly. And transfer case ratio is now 1 to 1. Delete mile per hour and calculate. So that puts us at 81.6. I would love to be going a little slower than that, to be honest with you. I would like 3,000 RPM with the setup that we're going to have, I think is going to perform best if we were at 3,000 RPM at 70, not 81. I don't know if I really want to even take this Jeep 81. So either way, let's write that down. So we got 81.6 miles per hour with that ratio. So let's go option 2, and option 2 is going to be a 3.5 ratio. The good news is that 3.5 is pretty cheap. $155 per ring and pinion set is about the cheapest I've found so far. Okay, so we're at 1.92 for our portal box times 3.50 for this ring and pinion ratio, and we're at a 672. That is low. What's beautiful about it being that low is if we try to do that in the diff, which you can order some really low ring and pinions for Ford 9-inch, but if we try to do that in a diff, the pinion gets smaller and smaller and smaller, right? Well, because we're using like a highway gear and then we're making up for that reduction in the portal box, we are helping to wick away some of the stress and strain from our shafts, from our diffs, and onto those portal boxes. And we don't have to sacrifice the strength of the ring and pinion and still get a crazy low ratio. It would be so fun to be this low. So let's calculate this out now. So we'll do our highway ratio first. So at 3,000 RPM, transfer case ratio, yep, that's all correct. What did I say? I said I wanted to be at 70 miles an hour. We're at 69.9. Transfer case ratio, 5.44 for our doubler. And yes, that's all correct. 225 to 1 crawl ratio. For an automatic, that wouldn't make any sense at all. You wouldn't even be able to stop it. Like if it was geared that low, you would be just slammed on the brakes and be really difficult to get that your torque converter disengage. But for a manual, I love an on and off switch. So our final crawl ratio would be 2:5 to 1. And that's at its lowest. So let's just say that I wanted to use just 2.72 to 1 in the transfer case. Let's see what that puts us at. 2.72 to 1. So that puts us at 112. So that means that with this gearing, with a normal 2.72 to 1 transfer case, I would be geared almost as low as I was before with a 5.44 to 1, like a doubler transfer case. That is wild. That just shows you the power of portals, and especially with like gear reduction this much. So if you're someone who's trying to build a really good crawler that has, that has it all, something that can, well, for crawling, something that has big ground clearance, something that has all that extra reduction and everything else, but you were trying to figure out where to save money, knowing that transfer cases are crazy expensive, maybe you build yourself a set of budget portals like what I'm doing, and you still will end up with a crazy low gear ratio because you can do a 3.5, which is not a very low ratio, but it is in this instance, a 3.5 gear set in your diffs, and then you can save the money on the T case. While Nate 1 was just up there hanging out in his office, calculating out diff ratios, Nate number 2 was down in the shop having to make some pretty hard decisions. I want to be able to bolt these portal boxes to the table, and I want to be able to do it cheaply, of course. I don't want to like go buy material to do this. So I'm going to just see what I have laying around. We're going to punch some holes in some steel. We're going to chop some stuff into like consumable sizes, and I want to start from the outside in like I said before. And I think that I have a path forward. We have officially made it to step 1. Step 0, in my opinion, is just getting some things kind of going so that we can start layout. So now we have established the outsides of our axle. And the next step, I think, is going to be take some measurements on the Jeep, take some measurements on our transfer case, and then we can measure from the center of this, imagining it's the center of the Jeep, move this over to where it's going to be located, and then we can start fabbing up an axle housing. I've got an alignment rod on the way with some like special cups and stuff to go in there so that we can make sure that we fab this housing nice and straight and square. Then we can suspend the housing and start fabricating our inner Cs. For those of you that are wondering, we're gonna be building our own inner Cs from scratch instead of buying them, just to save on cost. The axle tubes is 3-inch DOM by 3/8 wall. If we were building a big, giant, heavy-duty truck, I would probably want to go a little taller on the tube thickness, but for a TJ, I think that this will fit our application just fine. So we have a good starting point. And my plan is once we start to get things hung and we have the housing actually built and we're getting ready to start fabricating inner Cs, I have a plan. I'm going to work with a guy with a big lathe locally, and we're going to key in to these bad boys with an alignment rod that's going to go all the way across so that we can suspend everything. We'll make fine adjustments by building one more bracket to attach back here, and then we can basically tighten and loosen in order to get some fine adjustments done and make sure that both sides are exactly the same. And then we start fabbing, baby. I still have some big decisions to make. But right now, you know what? I want to pull some measurements off of the Jeep and some measurements off our transfer case so that we can transfer those to the table and decide where to put our front diff. It's pretty tight, 24 inches from inside frame rail to inside frame rail. I mean, I could cut and modify and move things around. I don't see the need to do that. I mean, I fit a diff up in there before. It's just, it's gonna be snug between the motor. Oh, that's right. With the TDI though, the motor starts like way back here. So the diff is gonna be like in front of the TDI. I just need to make sure my pinion doesn't get into the engine. Well, let's go check out the T-case. So the 4-speed Atlas is about 9.5 inches from input to output. I guess we'll start with our frame rails. They're 24 inches inside frame rail to inside marker. We're 24 inches inside frame rail to inside frame rail. Boom, boom. And you know what's actually probably more important than putting the housing there is to put this diff there. As you can see, the diff is offset from the center a little bit, but this way it's offset from the center a lot. Like this is gonna be an ultra high pinion front diff. So we have a couple of options here. I've got my center mark here, move it on over. Dude, that's gonna be real close to our inner C. We can widen the axle out a touch in order to make room for the inner C if we think we need it, which I think we're gonna probably need it. But, oh yeah, and if we move this too much closer, that's gonna end up being like getting closer to the engine territory. Now, transfer case was 9.5 from the center line to, it's close to 9.5. We're about 11 right now. So we could move that in. I don't think we're gonna have any issues with that engine because the TDI is so small. But I'm seeing, oh yeah, that's more tools. That right there is almost exactly where the output for the transfer case is. That's not super important on a build like this, but if I ever want to drive it over a snowy mountain pass in 4-wheel drive or anything like that, I like to at least know what to expect. Honestly, if we were within like a 4-inch margin, so like 2 inches one way, 2 inches the other, it's a long enough front drive shaft, I probably wouldn't notice. But if we're gonna try to do plan A and then adjust as necessary. What I like about moving it in to where it's in line with the transfer case is it gives us a little bit more room for that inner C. But boy, this is gonna be tight. Front diff right there. So I think it would actually end up being about there. This is a method bead grip. And this is the exact wheel that I run on my Tacoma. This will give us a good idea of how wide outside tire to outside tire will be at 72 inches. We are at about 4.25. It's not gonna want to focus on what I want it to, but from wheel mount surface out to the edge of rim, we're like 4.25. I figure once you add the tire on there, we're gonna be at about 6 inches-ish from where it is now. So that puts us, right now we would be at 80 inches on the nose, I think, 68 plus 12. Then if we push it out 2 inches on this side, so one hole, lock it in, push it out one hole, lock it in. That would put us at around 84 inches outside tire to outside tire. So I think that that would be acceptable for a TJ. That doesn't sound crazy. I mean, a 1-ton swap, actually, this is a really good comparison. This is a 2005 and up Ford Super Duty. This is actually out of a 08. I believe the wheel mount surface to wheel mount surface measurement on this axle is 72 inches. And most people are not wheeling around with a, whatever I said, plus 18 millimeter wheel. So a lot of people are on the trail much wider than 84 in their TJs. So I think that we can make this work. We ran into a little bit of a problem. I thought I was gonna have an alignment rod by the end of this video, and it just got delayed to Monday. Because what I wanted to do in this video is wrap it up with us fabbing the housing and getting the housing all set and where it's supposed to be. But now I can't do that, unfortunately. But I've had so many requests to get back to the high detailed videos like they used to be. And so I'm going to try to do that a lot more and try to give you way more detail on the different decisions that I'm making out here. And so even though this video is just normal planning stuff that I wouldn't normally even share, I figure that some of you would enjoy it. So also check it out. Finally have a railing up here. Turned out pretty good. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. The next one's gonna be awesome. We should have the alignment rod. We'll be able to start actually gluing a bunch of this stuff together and planning out how to build these inner C's and making some really big decisions on some of the parts we still need to order. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you on the next one.